they're changing my voice. So I have 10 more symbols to go through. I'm going to take about a minute, 30 seconds each, and I'm just going to go through these quickly here. This is part 2. So the gavel. The gavel was used by judges and leaders to enforce order, and it still is, okay, in the kind of worldly sense that it is, right? Western orders aren't divine, they're not mature, they're just unfair. It supposedly symbolizes a Mason's effort to refine their character, aiming to eliminate negative traits and habits to achieve moral integrity. And again, it's a play on words, right? They're trying to eliminate certain behaviors and ways of thinking to achieve what they call moral integrity, which is really consistency with Luciferianism. And Pike wasn't the only one who wanted that in Masonry. Enough people wanted it so that it came about, whether it was that way from the start, which is what a lot of evidence suggests, or it eventually became that way. Okay, so they talk about the pursuit of personal growth and ethical living values. And they say that these ideas are central to Freemasonry. Right? It's also key there where they say it's central to Freemasonry. What we see by their works that they're producing evil. When you accept the boundaries of Masonry or any other Western club, and you put that before God, and what you're doing is clearly evil. So now the all-seeing eye. It's said to be influenced by the ancient Egyptians, who revered the Eye of Horus for its protective qualities. Well, they were a little bit off there. The Eye of Horus was about guiding the nation in the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order's vision, which was the universal alpha vision of all mankind. So people can break off into groups, right? But they're not going to have that vision. And they could pretend that their chief is divinely chosen, but they weren't. I know a lot of people don't like it explained that way. And this is part of what Masons try to use. They try to say, hey, that's not fair to all of us, but they want to kind of guide people behind the scenes, just like American democracy, where people, democracy where people guide you behind the scenes and pretend that you have a say, and the whole thing's rigged. Okay, that's modeled after Masonry and things like that. So they argue that there's a higher power observing their every thought and action, okay, that is often shown in the triangle, but they're really showing the Masonic spirit, right? The Masonic deities, their family way about them. The statue and state of being, their state of being of the quote-unquote master Masons. Even the word master rhymes with faster, right, which alludes to martial arts. Martial is marital scrambled, and I Christ and the bridegroom. And I'm not a Freemason. And I abhor Freemasonry and the so-called masters and grand masters of Freemasonry. Okay, they're not consistent with God's plan. Okay, so the eye to them symbolizes living with honesty and moral integrity. Okay. The constant watch of the divine, and the oversight of the divine, which, when you become one with it, allows for moral and intellectual growth according to them. So it also symbolizes deep wisdom and the presence of the divine. To make a long story short, that's their argument. Now, that sign in its pure form, used by someone who's righteous, symbolizes God watching you, God being with you, okay, you having a sort of vision that's given to you by God, but that's not how they're using it. So Freemasons are known for their dirty tricks like politicians, and a lot of them are in the CIA and other groups like that. And so them fuming me right now to try to change my voice to make it sound gay or make it sound like I'm magically manic when I'm not mentally ill, and I've had many people verify that I'm not mentally ill, though it goes without saying because I'm the top martial arts. It is impossible to be the top martial arts ever possible and to be mentally ill. If you don't know that, you are severely mentally ill. Straightforward. Or retarded or something. So now the Masonic level. It was commonly used to ensure straightness, and uniformity. In Freemasonry, it's said to symbolize the fundamental equality of all Masons. Of course, that is not logical. That is nowhere near logical. Does a group work so they all have the same economic status? No. Okay, so they're using that word in a way that is laughable. So it says, irrespective of their personal backgrounds and their roles in the external world, the level is said to encourage equal treatment among members, emphasizing the idea that the essence of a person's character is paramount. Is that what we see in society? No. A lot of Masons own corporations. Do they hire in a way that's fair? No, they hire in a way that's consistent with the thinking of society at large, which is unfair hiring practices. Depending on your political party, how you're playing the game, that's how they hire. They don't hire based on character and qualifications. And they sabotage people to the extreme. And then they turn around and say, well, who's qualified? Well, you're not scrambling to make sure that society's fair. And they're trying to elevate those who play the game a certain way. So Masons are concerned with playing the game and having a level playing field in the game for those who are first-class citizens, if that. It's very sick. There's some token minors helping them because they get thrown a bone. Okay, and keep in mind that a lot of slaves during slavery were Freemasons. Pretty straightforward. Okay. What distinguishes it from other symbols is how it is incorporated into rituals where it is used alongside other significant tools like the plume and square. These practices emphasize their so-called core values and teachings. It also encourages a life of balance. Okay, so it basically says, they're saying it also encourages a life of balance and ethics and honor, and it's all bullshit, okay? They're just upholding the governing class. So going on to the plume. So there's not much more to the level than that. It's basically that, and then they do all kinds of silly rituals, and they reinforce the psychology of Masonry so that its members maintain adherence to the psychopathic agenda of the elite. It's pretty straightforward. So the plume. It is used to make sure that structures are built vertical and upright and over time. It is a symbol of living lives that are upright and honorable, aligning with the so-called moral principles of Freemasonry. It also highlights the importance of goodness and ethical actions as pathways to spiritual development. So again, that's what they were saying, right? In a sense, it does that, but they don't use it that way, and they don't live that way. And so the plume, I think these things are they're like Western symbols, right? They're Western building tools. They're tools that they must have had some kind of counterpart in ancient Africa, what have you, but they're Western washed, just like Masonry itself, right? Their clothing, the way they do things, it's Western, very English. The English were like the main people who brought Western Masonry into the world. So it's a very white Jewish and English supremacy system, an LGBT supremacy system. That's why we have a white Jewish and LGBT supremacy planet. And to their extreme disgrace, mind you. The next is the mosaic, aka the checkered floor. It represents the floor of King Solomon's temple. It is depicted as a checkered pattern of black and white. And it serves as an allegory for the the dual nature of life, according to them, and the universe. They illustrate the coexistence of good and evil. Look at this all. When I read this, it's painful. Is the universe, a dual existence universe? No. Okay, there's good conquering evil. It's not meant to exist together. That's what the devil would say. The devil would say, hey, you can feed your family that way. Or, you can have nice things, and that's good. Okay, while he expects you to do his evil plan. That's textbook Satanism. Textbook. It reflects the human condition, urging Masons to acknowledge the world's diversity and the significance of achieving balance and harmony. So they're basically saying, hey, people aren't perfect, right? Like the church is saying, we're all born sinners, instead of the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Orders argument, which is strive to be perfect. If you look at society, look at Freemasons, they're kind of like, not taking things seriously. They're like, oh, and they're joking around and they're acting like punks and they're not scrambling to do what's right. And so the checkered floor reminds them that their foundation, instead of righteousness and justice, which is the foundation of the Royal African Falcon Martial Art Order, Horus's true form, Christ's true form, God's true nature, they want people to build with evil. Now, if you see how it extends into Jewish culture, in popular culture, again, in popular culture, Jews in popular culture, the stereotypes are said to be greedy. Okay? When people are greedy, they don't care about being morally precise. They only care about their greed. So the foundation of Masonry is wickedness and greed. That checkered floor is exactly the opposite argument of the moral perfection argument. And to them, perfecting themselves is perfecting themselves relative to the mosaic, aka the checkered floor, which represents darkness and Luciferian light. In other words, if you were to work for the Nazis and you could feed your kids, you had a nice house, and you treated people with a certain respect, okay, that would be the Luciferian light. Where you're clearly in the wrong and you're torturing people and you're poisoning people and doing experiments, that's clearly darkness. So it represents, if you think of it in terms of Nazism, it's easier to understand than perhaps Judaism, even though Jews in popular culture are said to be greedy and are said to sabotage people, right? In the midst of that, there's Einstein, there's this and that here and there, but they're not very good people. So what we know of them in popular culture, we'll say in terms of stereotypes to keep it simple and not break the rules, is we know of them as a greedy people. For example, every group here in America is known as greedy. Americans generally are greedy. Okay? The richest groups of Americans, whites, Jews, and LGBT, where they're rich, are greedy as hell. And the other members of their groups by association are said to be greedy because that's how people communicate. For example, if they were to say, black people, fight well. Does every black person fight well? No. But that's how we communicate. And that's part of how they're using Masonic wordplay and censorship. Say, hey, you can't say that, because if you speak a certain way, you're likely to correct their Masonic error as a society, and they don't want that. It also says that the floor urges them to reflect on their decisions, understanding right from wrong. Of course, relative to Luciferian conceptions of right and wrong. And I've proven that definitively in part 1, and I've proven that definitively in part 2. The Bible says you know them by their works, and it testifies against them as there's always a Bible open in their lodges. And again, just because you build children's hospitals doesn't mean you're a good person. Quite often people who do horrible things do things to address the guilt, which is the American way. It's the Western way. The West is known for doing all kinds of horrible things as a group, and they're known for doing little bit shit to make themselves feel better here and there. The Red Cross, compared to Western neo-colonial treachery, is a laughable effort to do good. It nowhere near covers it, as 9 million people starve to death and die of hunger-related issues alone every year. 3 million of them children, that's 10,000 children a day. Part of the output of Freemasonry is not scrambling to do God's work. It's not scrambling also to even at least feed the poor. They just throw them a little bone. Going back to the wordplay, G-O-D spelled backwards is D-O-G. Now, who would make it that way? People who deal in wordplay, scribes and Freemasons. And the people who came before them, who came up with the language, or maybe certainly they were around when English was changed into its more modern form, as opposed to Old English and whatever was before that, and its Latin roots. It's not a coincidence. Next symbol is the 47th problem of Euclid, aka the Pythagorean theorem, which is often described as a squared equals b squared plus c squared. Okay, so basically what the geek problem, the 47th problem, Pythagorean's nerd equation, the Pythagorean nerd theorem, rather, is that the square of the length of a hypotenuse of a right angled triangle equals the square of the length of its sides. They use this as Greeks, and the word Greek, no offense to the Greek people, is a play on words for geek and greed. Those words are similar. They use rhyme and reason. They use similar words. They use word plays with the vowels. The vowels are interchangeable. Vowel to L. Alpha, bet. Betting on the alpha. Magic spell and spelling. It represents their failure to be wise while they focus on education in vain and claim to be doing the right thing, what have you. Now, Masons are notorious for being scatterbrained people. Even when you don't know they're a Mason, you see a scatterbrained person who tries to be intellectual. Like, hi! It's like a teacher in college. They're very similar to these guys. Very scatterbrained. Very disorganized when it comes to what matters most in life. And then they zoom in. Sometimes they do a very good job with the equation on the, with teaching the class or what they write on the board. But their life is a fucking mess. And Masonry isn't just about the things you get taught in college. It's about life directions and building a society to control sexual behavior, not just reproduction, but how people actually have sex. Look up voyeurism. The reason why porn is out there, there's a lot of ways they do that. And they watch you with various devices and technologies these days, not just the Masons. There's a lot of Masons in the government, so on record, for those of you who are Freemasons want to argue with me about it, on record, there's Freemasons in the government, and the government is watching people, and they're organizing harassment and stalking campaigns. That's why it's called gang stalking. They're watching people illegally, and quite often in a perverted manner. And they sexually harass me all the time. It's very sick what you people are doing. You should be very ashamed of yourselves. Very ashamed of yourself. And firing back at me doesn't change the fact that I should not be ashamed of myself, but you people should be ashamed of yourselves. Nothing could change that. Okay. Unless, of course, you obey God through me. But no one should reproduce, Mason or otherwise, no matter what. The hourglass. Okay, so basically they have the hourglass, the Ark of the Covenant. I'm just going to go through these all at the same time. The trowel and the lambskin. So the hourglass basically reminds you that time is going by and you need to move quickly. It reminds you that, Hiram Abiff passed away, while doing his work. It reminds you of the urgency of fulfilling your duties, what have you. And you're supposed to have duties to God and not Masonry. They talk about perseverance and integrity and stuff like this, but they don't have it. Next point, the Ark of the Covenant. God's promises, right? And the guidance of God, which they think is through Freemasonry, and it's not. And the importance of knowledge of God, not useless and excessive knowledge, like memorizing every word in the dictionary or something, okay? Focusing on what matters most, prioritizing, what have you. Okay, that's part of God's ark. The Masonic ark is a silly, cowardly teacher's ark. It's like Weishaupt, just a dumb fuck, okay? And it leads them to hell as they try to have unity and brotherhood working together to cheat me out of my right to lead and to cheat society on behalf of the governing class and their own greed and their own cowardly desire to survive. The trowel was used to shred mortar. It symbolizes unity and them being complicit with building the evil structure of the New World Order. Pretty straightforward. They talk about offering help secretly, but again, throwing a bone to people doesn't change the fact that their life direction, the essence of who they are, is pure evil. The lambskin apron was worn to shield one's clothes while working. It's said to represent purity, innocence, and, trying to keep your soul clean. Every new member is given one and is regarded as the most traditional and esteemed attire. It symbolizes their so-called basically a so-called virtuous intelligence and path and intentions and things of this nature, okay? And that they're supposed to have their spirit that remains unchanged, which goes back to the checkered floor. To me, perhaps the most important symbol of Masonry to understand them is their checkered floor, and you have to understand that it stands for, it should be black and red to help you understand. It's pure evil and it's darkness. To them, it's about pretending they have the light of God when they have Luciferian light. Okay, if you understand light in the Bible, what they're doing is extremely serious and extremely evil. The truth lets itself be known, right? We see it in John, I want to say it's John chapter 2 or 3, when Jesus is talking to Nicodemus, I believe. I'm confusing this with something else, but one thing's for sure, it says it in John. It says that the one who does the work of God does so openly, so that their deeds may be seen plainly, so that everyone may know that what they have done has been done in the sight of God, as opposed to a secret society that has been allowed by the elite for hundreds of years because it is evil. And it's connected to the propaganda of the state, where they pretend that America magically isn't evil. You think being the wealthiest country in the world, having 800,000 people homeless is evil? You think not doing enough to process rape kits is evil? Yes. Okay? Now, of course, they changed the tone of my voice just there, going back to Masonic wordplay. Part of it is the tone and who's saying it and what you perceive the person to be when they're saying it. Okay? America has done a lot of evil. Even their major parties often say that. Donald Trump says he's going to drain the swamp, okay, of politics. And the politics is full of Masons. Like, what the fuck don't people get? They think the most influential Masons are some poor homeless guy who happens to be a Mason who lost everything or something? If that even happens? Or you think it's politicians and rich, greedy scum and corporate people? 1 in 5 corporate people are psychopaths, and 1 in 5 Masons are probably psychopaths using the same scale because they help each other attain positions like that. We have no reason to believe otherwise. And there's narcissists. Lots of these guys are narcissists and sociopaths. There's no other way to look at it. Look at who they are, what they're doing, what they have done, what you think they will do in the future, and it's open and shut. God commands all Freemasons to give up Freemasonry and to obey God through me. Are they going to respond? No. And stupidity is proven stupid by its deeds, and wisdom is proven right by her deeds. And you know them by their works. Don't forget that the essence of who they are people who came together and decided to persecute the Son of God at the most important time of history, revealing the essence of their building. They think it's smart to fume me and interfere with my videos, thus interfering with God's plan, thus making themselves the extreme enemies of God. They think if they make it so it sounds corny that they win something, or hard to listen to, or manic, or gay. I'm not gay. God's spirit is not gay at all. Can you imagine them thinking that their fairy, heel-clicking Peter Pan craft is greater than moral, which it could never be, moral precision? Can you imagine? Imagine the look on their frat faces. Their frat-like 322, George Bush going 322, 322. Their skull and bones, frat-like faces. When they're on their deathbeds and they realize the full wrath of God is going to be on their souls forever. Can you imagine the look on these old idiots as they betrayed God their whole life? They've led their children to a devil life, and now they're going to meet their maker. You call that a moral path? You call that the path of moral perfection? You know how fucking dumb someone has to be to join Masonry and to stay a Mason. These are fucking people who are mildly retarded, period, or worse.